My own personal reason as to why I would never sign a prenup is because I feel like I'm ultimately jinxing my marriage at that point. Because what do you mean? We are talking about, we are planning, we are anticipating, we are getting our attorneys involved about this future divorce before even walking down the aisle. That just doesn't sit right with me. At that point, I would rather just not get married. Let's just be in a relationship. For most of my life, I didn't even want to get married.
Translation: if I don't get the leverage over you, there's no point. Okay, so today we're actually talking about a risk mitigation tactic. So welcome to Pearl Daily, guys. If you've been watching my channel long enough, you know that, I don't think marriage is the most favorable deal for men. You do have to make your own decisions as a man, but especially in the modern age with modern women, men really have everything to lose. They have nothing to gain. And the idea of marriage, even in the age of women making more money, being independent and doing for themselves, is, that a man is still supposed to sacrifice himself for women. And I've asked so many people, especially the tradcons that tell men to get married, what's in it for the man? As you guys saw from my documentary. They never have a good answer other than shaming men for being degenerates. That's really, or telling you that you got to do it for my kids. It's like, dude, most men aren't going to be able to have children. Where's their incentive? Even if you get married, there's no guarantee she could just go abort your kid. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting because they always put it like, what's in it for them? They're like, society, we have to save society. And the average man is thinking, yeah, for your kids. I don't know if I'm going to get custody of my kids. My kids don't belong to me. You're a rich guy, right? So there's influencers on the right. They just use every single trick in the book to try to get men to take a deal that is just not favorable to men. But the most vocal tactic I've heard recently is a prenup will save you. I'm sorry to be skeptical. I doubt it. So what is a prenup? It's a legally binding contract signed by two people before marriage that outlaws how their assets and debts will be handled in the event of a divorce or death. This allows couples to define their own rules for property division and spousal support that can differ from the laws of the state. But here's the thing. Many women, they'll hate men for even asking for a prenup. Even the question will give women a reason to shame her man for the rest of their life. She now has the ability to hold that over your head forever. And, men can get screwed in court even if they do have a prenup. A lot of the time, the man is forced to pay a lawyer and for her lawyer while the divorce proceedings are going on, and she can just keep challenging the prenup. And by the way, guys, when these influencers cite you stats that prenups are effective, ask them where they got the stats from. 90% of the time, it's from a law office. And I just have to ask, what is the incentive for a law office that's selling prenups to be honest about how effective they are? That's like a restaurant when you ask them, is your kitchen clean? And they say, yeah. Can we verify that from a third party? Well, no, we told you it works, right? I don't believe that prenup agreements are the magical solutions that tradcons are making it out to be. It's also funny that so many religious influencers are telling men to get state legal protections against their virtuous wives. What's up with that? So here's an article talking about, are there downsides to prenups? Okay. Are there downsides to prenups? Like every good thing in life, sometimes there are downsides to even the best of things like candy and prenups. Candy is delicious, sweet, and fun to eat, but the downside, too much of it will send you straight to the dentist. Prenups help protect you financially. They set expectations with your spouse and reduce the stress of divorce if it ever happens. But the downside is that prenups can be expensive. See what we mean? There are downsides to even the greatest things on earth, like candy and prenups. A prenuptial agreement is a contract between two fiancés who are getting married. It outlines the terms and conditions of their marriage, including the division of property and assets in the event of a divorce or death. While prenups provide several advantages for couples, it is important to also consider the limitations, drawbacks, and potential risks associated with them before deciding if a prenup is right for you. Prenups have become increasingly popular in recent years as more couples look for ways to protect their assets, clarify their financial expectations, and reduce the stress and uncertainty of divorce proceedings. In the article, we'll take a closer look at the pros and cons of prenups so you can make an educated decision about whether a prenup is right for you. All right, so the advantages of a prenup is protecting assets. Many people get prenups to protect their assets, whether you have $50,000 or $50 million, a prenup can protect that money. Assets can include bank accounts, retirement funds, real estate, and much more. For the sake of a prenup, assets are either accrued before the marriage or during the marriage. You can protect both existing assets and the future assets in a prenup by marking them as separate property. This means that your assets will be safeguarded and you won't have to worry about losing them in the event of a divorce. Defining the terms and conditions of the marriage and divorce. A prenup allows you and your partner to define the terms and conditions of your marriage, which can help reduce stress and uncertainty. You and your partner can specify how assets and debts will be divided in the case of a divorce, which will help ensure that both spouses are on the same page. A prenup not only clarifies what should happen in the event of a divorce, but also the terms of a marriage. Things like marital expenses, joint bank accounts, and other financial obligations can be outlined in the prenup to dictate the rules of the marriage. Reducing the stress and uncertainty of divorce proceedings. Because the terms and conditions of your marriage have been agreed upon in advance, the divorce process can be much smoother and less stressful. There will be less room for disagreement and less uncertainty, which can make the process less emotionally taxing. In other words, the big issues like property and debt division have already been decided on in your prenup. If you have a prenup, you pretty much know what's going to happen in your divorce. Taking the uncertainty out of divorce processes can provide a lot of peace in mind and relief to many. Clarifying financial expectations. A prenup allows you and your partner to clarify your financial expectations, which can help prevent misunderstandings and conflict down the road. When your financial expectations are clear, you'll be less likely to experience financial conflict in your marriage. What do we mean by financial expectations? Well, do one of you expect to be a stay-at-home parent? Maybe one of you makes significantly more than the other who would pay the bills. Maybe the less earning spouse falsely believed the higher earning spouse would cover most of them. The list goes on and on. These are the things that need to be worked out in a prenup and will help clarify expectations. The downside of prenups. While prenups have many benefits, there are some drawbacks to consider. Here are some limitations and drawbacks of prenups. Difficulty in predicting financial circumstances. Did you know that Jeff Bezos did not have a prenup with his ex-wife? It's crazy, we know. When he started Amazon, he probably had no idea that it would launch him directly into the billionaire status. Just like Jeff Bezos, there's no telling where you'll be in 5, 10, or 15 years. You could be orbiting around the earth like Jeff in 10 years and you'll never know. It can be difficult to predict your financial circumstances. Okay, where's the downside? Well, depending on your state law and your specific circumstances, a prenup that was fair and reasonable at the time of your marriage may no longer be in the event of a divorce. The possibility of a prenup being considered unfair or unenforceable. In some cases, prenups may be considered unfair or unenforceable by the courts. This can occur for various reasons, such as if the prenup was not entered into voluntarily, if it was not properly executed, or if it contains provisions that are illegal, such as provisions related to child custody and support. There are things you can do to ensure your prenup is as ironclad as possible, like using Hello Prenup or an attorney to draft your prenup, which can help you ensure that your prenup is up to par with correct state laws. However, there are some things that are out of your control, such as major change in circumstances. All right, now we got this pretty blonde lady talking about prenups.
A common question we get all the time has to do with, will my prenup hold up in court? That's a really loaded question, but I'm going to break it down for you from a legal perspective. In the vast majority of states, when you get divorced, you can either get divorced amicably or you have a litigated divorce case, which is what people oftentimes think of when they think of divorce, like on TV, right? You see a trial, it's very dramatic. The vast majority of divorce cases do not get to that point because it's really expensive. When you have a prenup and you get divorced, you can either choose to follow the terms of the prenup, and that may occur through either each hiring attorneys and hammering out, negotiating the terms of your divorce based on what is in the prenuptial agreement. Or, and again, I'm speaking very generally because each state is different, you can file in court and have a litigated case in order to come to the conclusion as to whether or not the prenuptial agreement should be enforced by the court. My point in explaining all of this to you is to show you that there is a wide gap between having a prenup and following the terms that you contracted to and having a court actually have to enforce that prenuptial agreement and incorporate the terms into a divorce judgment. So back to the original question, will my prenup hold up in court? Well, this question is up to the court at the time of your divorce. I do not have a crystal ball. I do not know what a judge at the time of your divorce
Yeah, it kind of depends on the judge you get.
is going to decide. Every case is different. And if you have any additional questions,
Okay. All right, the possibility of a prenup being challenged in court. Let's back it up a little bit. In order to even have a prenup be declared unenforceable by a court, you have to go through the court process. In other words, your spouse has to challenge the prenup. The prenup itself doesn't just walk into the courtroom and let the judges know it's a bad prenup. No, somebody has to challenge the prenup. Now, the process of challenging the prenup can result in lengthy and costly legal battles, which can be emotionally taxing and time-consuming. The downside here is the mere act of dealing with a court battle. The possibility of a prenup being used as a bargaining tool. Sometimes a prenup can be used as a bargaining tool in divorce proceedings. How? Well, a lawyer could theoretically threaten to or actually file a complaint with the court challenging the prenup. The bargaining tool here would be dropping the complaint in exchange for something like more money in the divorce or a settlement. This can make the whole divorce process more complicated and emotionally taxing. The possibility of a prenup costing a lot of money. Prenups can be very expensive, especially if you hire a lawyer to draft the agreement. The average prenup costs about $2,500. That's just for the average case. If you have a ton of questions, complex finances, or difficult requests, your prenup could end up costing $10,000 or more. Yikes. Luckily, Hello Prenup is here to save the day. Okay. Now they're selling their prenups. All right, common misconceptions about prenups. Many people think about common misconceptions about prenups as the downside to prenups when in actuality it's not even true. So we want to clear up some of the common myths floating around there for you. Prenups are never upheld. That is not true. Prenups are often upheld despite what people believe. Yes, there are times when a prenup is not upheld, but that is not the baseline standard. The bottom line, it is possible to craft a valid and enforceable prenup that the court will uphold if you get a good judge. Prenups can only protect one person. Wrong. Prenups can protect both parties, but in different ways. For example, spouse A can protect the majority of their future inheritance and pre-existing assets, while spouse B can still receive alimony and a lump sum payment to support them after the marriage ends. Prenups mean your relationship will fail. Oftentimes, people cite distrust, a bad omen, or a failed relationship for their reason for not getting a prenup. Is that true? It could be true, but it's not necessarily true. Think about it this way. When you purchase car insurance, does that mean it's a bad omen and you're bound to fail at driving and crash every single day? Of course not. Car insurance is simply a plan B in case things go wrong, which they might not. Think of a prenup in the same way. A prenup is simply plan B in case things go wrong. Getting a prenup doesn't equal failure. Is a prenup right for you? Should I get a prenup? That is the question. Whether or not a prenup is right for you will depend on a number of factors. That includes your financial situation and your personal values. If you are thinking about getting a prenup, it's crucial to educate yourself with the resources available and or speak with a lawyer who can understand what is right for you. In your opinion, prenups can be can be for everyone regardless of your net worth. The conclusion is that prenups may have advantages and benefits, but they also have limitations and potential risks. It's important to carefully consider the pros and cons of a prenup before deciding if the one is right for you. If you're unsure about whether or not a prenup is right for you, it may be a good idea to educate yourself on prenup laws in your state or consult with a family law attorney who can help you evaluate the situation and make an informed decision. Okay, next we got 5 bad things about prenups. All right, 5 prenuptial pitfalls that may be bad for your marriage. All right, negotiating a prenup may damage your relationship and make divorce more likely. In the context of a prenup, there is usually an initiator spouse and a complement spouse. The dynamics of prenup negotiations may set up as a bad pattern for marriage. Some fiancés pushing for a prenup may be demonstrating a lack of faith in their partner and a lack of commitment to marriage. This can cause the compliant spouse to feel a lack of connection to the initiator fiancé and feel like the initiator is cold or callous. In addition, negotiating prenups is anything but romantic, and if prenup discussions become tense or difficult, they destroy a portion of the couple's love before they've even had a chance to enjoy their wedding. Negotiating finances is a harsh business, and it's often made harsher by a couple's lawyers. Generally speaking, both fiancés should hire attorneys to negotiate and draft a prenup on their own behalf because the agreement may not be enforceable without the involvement of separate legal counsel. Most lawyers representing parties in prenuptial negotiations act as if the entire transaction is purely business, although some aspects of a romantic partnership may require the partners focus on money and financial health. Marriage is not a business. Often, the initiating party says after the wedding, you can just put the premarital agreement in a drawer and forget about it. But of course, that's not true and not really possible. The premarital agreement simply cannot be forgotten. It's a legal contract both parties are bound to live by. There may be resentment on either side that was given up, not agreed to, and the resentment may rear its head in all aspects of marriage. Prenups tend to be, we love this word, coercive when negotiating parties do not have bargaining power. For example, when one fiancé asks for a prenup very close to the wedding date, after the invitations have been set out, the negotiation is unfair. The other fiancé may feel extreme pressure to agree to anything just so the wedding isn't canceled. In fact, under such circumstances, the compliant fiancé can claim that he or she did not have sufficient time to consider the prenup and was under extreme duress when signing it. In that case, the compliant spouse could have a very strong case for having the prenup overturned. There are other less extreme ways for bargaining power to be imbalanced. Maybe one fiancé is not savvy with the business or money matter and isn't sure what she is being asked to give up. Maybe the initiating fiancé is very influential and almost intimidating to his or her partner, such that the compliant fiancé can't imagine pushing back or asking questions about the prenup and feels impossible to say no to the proposed terms of the contract. Even mediators can be insensitive or unaware of any power imbalance when assisting clients in negotiating a prenup. Mediators should try to determine whether the agreement was proposed by both parties, may be really thought of as the only one, and whether the other party feels coerced. All motivations and feelings should be exposed and discussed in the mediation prior to the proceeding. Prenups may be inappropriate for couples entering into a marriage. Marriage is an exciting joint venture. An important part of the joint venture of marriage is the financial partnership. A spouse may correctly feel that some of this aspect of marriage has been taken away in a premarital agreement decreases that if a premarital agreement decreases that spouse's rights. State divorce laws are designed to handle the issues of disparity of income and disparity of premarital assets if and when the spouses get divorced. So insisting on prenuptial agreements that may end up harming the relationship may not be a sensible trade-off. However, prenuptial agreements can be highly useful for entering into second marriages who have children from first marriages. A prenup can balance the spouse's loyalty to the new spouse with the spouse's concern and loyalty to his or her children of the first marriage. Prenups often damage the relationship between the families of origin. An initiating party may want a financial agreement prior to the marriage due to the existence of family wealth and a proposal a premarital agreement that excludes all family property from the marriage forever. The result is that the future spouse's family feels humiliated and disrespected and never forgets the rebuff. This is not good for a relationship, and it will result in the family of origin that will be present during the entire marriage. A common example is where the initiating fiance doesn't want the prenuptial agreement, but spouse A's parents insist. The prenuptial agreement is made and agreed to, but the compliant spouse feels that spouse A was unable to stand up to his or her parents. The compliant spouse loses respect for spouse A and spouse A's parents. When one family of origin tries to control the marriage through a prenuptial agreement, it distributes the delicate balance in a couple's relationship and makes it more likely to fail. When prenuptial terms are unfair, divorcing spouses may end up in a court battle anyway. Prenuptial agreements do not always eliminate divorce court battles. Sometimes premarital agreements give a spouse a fraction of what he or she would be entitled to under state law. Although the outcome tends to support the notion that the deal is made in prenuptial agreements years earlier was unfair to the spouse, courts routinely enforce prenups that result in unfair outcomes, but will take a second look when enforcing the prenup would create such a disparity of wealth that the disadvantaged spouse would end up close to destitute or on public benefits. When a couple that had a prenup decides to divorce and the divorce seems to result in an unfair result to one spouse, the spouse may very likely go to court to try to have the prenup set aside and request that the court uses the laws of the state to make a decision about alimony and property division. Court cases that involve the validity of a prenup can be very expensive and time-consuming, and they can drag on for years. So it's important to realize that a prenup is no guarantee that you'll avoid divorce court. All right, so now let's see what the ladies are saying about prenups.
Clever
Let me make this full screen.
Things I've seen women put in prenups, Money Before Men edition. This is going to be fun. When I started doing prenup work, it was really because I had a divorce that I was working on and consulting with, and she had a friend who was getting married, and she was like, oh my God, you need to talk to Joanna. So a divorcing woman sent a woman getting married to me. And that's how prenup work was born. Sometimes I pinch myself that this is work that I do. But if I can help one woman avoid the mistakes that so many women have made before in getting married and wishing they could go back and do it again, it's worth it. Please keep in mind, this is very respective, okay? Like, someone might have like $35 million, own a tech company, have tons of houses. Like, it just depends on the situation. But I always love a 6-month emergency fund for a woman in a bank account with just her name on it in the event of a divorce. Someone I know was going to have a baby, and she put in writing that she wanted a tummy tuck, she wanted a nanny, she wanted house cleaning care. And in the event of a divorce, those services.
She put a tummy tuck in the divorce. You have got to be kidding me.
And level of living would be continued as part of the divorce settlement. So she would never lose support for.
Do you know what the trads don't take into account? You're negotiating with terrorists. So you're negotiating a prenup with a terrorist. And these conservative guys are not getting prenups. They think too highly of their wives. That's why they always get got. They always think my wife would never. And to be honest, if you think like that, you kind of deserve everything that's coming to you. Because TikTok is here, social media is here. And so before, the men of the past, women could hide our true nature a lot better. Not anymore.
For raising a child. One gal that I worked with had real estate money that she was able to invest every single year. And if the marriage came to an end, she would get to take all of the assets and portfolios that she'd built up over the course of the marriage, because she had sold her house to move in with him. And so she didn't have a place to live. So she needed a lot of options. Let me know if you want more ideas. I have them.
All right, what do we got next? Woman said she never would have married her husband if he made her sign a prenup.
This might be a
What are we rating her, guys? Fellas, 1 to 10. 1 to 10, let's go.
might be a little controversial, but I would not have married my husband if he made me sign a prenup. And I know I'm going to have a lot of people.
I'm giving her an inflated 6. I think she naturally would be a 5, but she's got some filters and stuff on. I guess she's thin. In America, she'll be a 6. She'd be like a 4 overseas.
Calling me a gold digger. Trust me, I am far from that. My husband and I, we are actually in love. We've been married for almost 15 years. We have 3 beautiful children. And I also make my own.
If they weren't in love, would she say it? Sorry, I'm a pessimist.
Money. It was actually my husband who taught me how to become my own successful, independent woman, how to get my own bag, because I believe that's what real men do. They want their woman to be the best version of themselves, and he did just that for me. But my own personal reason as to why I would never sign a prenup is because I feel like I'm ultimately jinxing my marriage at that point. Because what do you mean? We are talking about, we are planning, we are anticipating, we are getting our attorneys involved about this future divorce before even walking down the aisle. That just doesn't sit right with me. At that point, I would rather just not get married. Let's just be in a relationship. For most of my life, I didn't even want to get married.
Translation. If I don't get the leverage over you, there's no point.
Because, childhood trauma. So if we're going to get married, if you are going to be my husband, if I am your wife, it is for life. Okay, you are stuck with me, not only in this lifetime, but probably in many lifetimes afterwards, because I'm psycho like that. My husband didn't even bring up the idea of a prenup when we got married. And while he's not as successful as he is today, he still owned his own business and he was still doing far better than most 28-year-olds. And here I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So the fact that he didn't even bring it up to me, not once, it actually made me love him even more, because it showed me that we have the same morals and values when it comes to a marriage, when it comes to what being a husband and wife actually is. This is my own personal opinion. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm not saying that at all. I could be completely wrong and I'm okay with that. But if you are one of the women who actually did sign a prenup, I would love to know your reasons why and how you weren't offended by that.
How you weren't offended. By the way, guys, if you have any experience with prenups, we're going to do a call-in. So we're actually going to put the link in the chat now. I'm going to watch a couple more prenup videos, but if you know anybody that had a prenup, I want to hear from firsthand experience, your experiences with it.
And by the way, isn't it...
So we got James Sexton.
And by the way, isn't it lovely to hear what someone likes about you? I think it's one of the nicest things in the world when somebody says, you know what I like about you, Jim? I'm all ears. Tell me, Or if someone who I love and trust, I know you're my friend. So if you called me and you said, Jim, can I give you some constructive feedback? Like something I think you're doing that's getting in your own way? Dude, I would be all ears. That's an event in a couple's life, right? So why in this romantic context would you squander the opportunity to have that conversation? Here's what you bring to my life. Here's how you make me feel. Here's when I feel the most loved. Here's when I feel not as loved by you.
I think it's because when people hear the word prenup, they're thinking ending. I could be wrong, but I don't think most people associate the word prenup with anything about the success of the marriage, which is probably why so few people get them. Is there any idea roughly what percentage of
No, because what's
marriages?
amazing about a prenup is not filed anywhere. It's a contract.
And is it as binding as anything else?
Oh, yeah. For the 25 years I've been practicing, trust me, I've had a couple of prenups I've tried to set aside, and I've been unsuccessful, and I'm a good lawyer. But it's very hard to set aside a properly drafted prenup.
What is a properly drafted prenup? Is my question. Prenups can be thrown out in court. This guy's coming.
Oh, I also heard that prenups can get practically thrown out of court. Is that true?
Yeah. So
I want to hear from the field, not the lawyers, I want to hear from people in the field.
a lot of
I'm going to send a tweet too with this.
people's prenups get thrown out in court because You either had them sign it under duress, which happens the most.
What does that mean though? Sign it
Under duress means under pressure. So like the wedding's today, here's the paper or we ain't getting married. That's duress. Like you can't do it.
But how do they prove that in court if they got married like 5, 8, 10, 20 years before that?
Because you signed the date on it. And you know what the date of the marriage is.
Okay.
And so those sorts of things get you thrown out. But the biggest reason that that prenups get thrown out is because you didn't disclose all your assets.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It's so easy to like, especially if you're trying to move assets into other entities and that sort of thing. So like, yeah. So that's why I tell people, get your affairs in order before you get engaged. Because if you do that, you don't have to disclose. It's just no longer on the table. But like if you have assets in your name, you get engaged and you're in contemplation of marriage, you now have to disclose what you have before you can move it into a trust. Or it would be like you're hiding the assets.
Really? See, I didn't know that.
Okay, next. We got another woman saying she wouldn't sign a prenup.
There are going to be people online that say you didn't get married because he wanted you to sign a prenup.
Correct.
So why did you not just sign the prenup?
In that moment, it was, I'd rather walk away from something knowing that I chose myself than to spend the rest of my life not being loved the way that I love.
Translation, I want to take his money and virtue signal while I do it.
Somebody.